Hello. This is Caladoon, and welcome to episode 5 of Let's Analyze. Now, I touched on this a little bit in the final episode of the Let's Play for Depths of Arcala, but I think the single best and most powerful element of that map is the constant variation of playstyles, essentially, within each zone. For notation, I'm just going to steal a term from Extra Credits and call its changes differences in kind. Now, these changes represent fundamentally different gameplay shifts, not merely fighting a more powerful mob. So, fighting a blaze versus a creeper, that's a difference in kind. Whereas fighting a zombie versus a zombie with better gear, that's not. That's just scaling up numbers. So, to kind of discuss this, and we're going to grab some examples to show how it makes better gameplay, we're going to grab one dungeon from each intersection, because there's examples scattered all over. In order, we've got the Spider's Den, Forgotten Temple, Into the Fire, Portal Island, and the Source. And while I'm at it, I'll probably discuss any other awesome things these areas do. First off, we have the Spider's Den. Now, back in episode 2 of Let's Analyze, we talked about the difficulty curve here with lots of pictures, and so I'm only going to briefly talk about this, but I'll probably reuse a few of the pictures too. First off, you might recall this diagram. Now, we can kind of break this this dungeon up into 4 zones, really. There's the intro, the cliffs, the cliff top, and the caves. Now, the intro is great, has a little ring of land surrounding water, very narrow space to fight the mobs. The little space has the player either walking on treetops or hacking through leaves to find the spawners. It's very up close and personal. The cliffs, however, have the player kind of zigzagging up a cliff while spiders rain down on their heads. A very different shift in combat from that intro. But most interesting, though, is the cliff top, since I called that its own area initially, but really it's not. Right? We've got 2 clumps of trees, left and right, separated with a relatively flat surface, with each section having different gameplay. The flat surface has you sniping the approaching spiders before they poison you, or just bite you for regular ones, whereas the trees encourage close quarters combat, like they did at the very start, with the left branch there encouraging, frankly, much more intense close quarters combat because it has cave spiders, and is just bigger. Now, so not only does this add some good variation, along with kind of a recurring motif of close quarters combat, but in a way, this helps the player acclimate to the very claustrophobic and positional combat that they have to think about when they're in the caves proper. Not only is this a great example of varying up the difference in kind, but in a sense, this little portion here is almost a tutorial. It's a practice run for the caves without actually having any caves. So, the Forgotten Temple has 4 main sections to it as well. We have hallways, vertical shafts, large rooms, and a maze, all connected in a mostly linear fashion. Bit of branching, but it's pretty linear overall. Just like with the Spider's Den, each section has very different gameplay. Hallways will have you dealing with skeletons and zombies. Usually it pits there, but there's usually enough corners and little other places to kind of duck and hide behind. Mobs are dangerous there, but by no means overwhelming. Next, though, are the vertical shafts. Now, these are filled with spider webs and my favoritist of mobs, and the constant threat of gravity makes the vertical shafts pretty harrowing, actually. Now, interestingly, though, if we think about it kind of at a base level, the gameplay isn't too much different for the halls and the shafts. Both of them are 3x3 wide, and as you go, you're going to move slowly, taking out spawners, building cover, be that maybe a little shelf to stand on for the vertical shaft, or just a wall in front of you for a hallway. Despite that, though, the shaft feels far, far more dangerous, all with just a 90-degree rotation and some spider webs. Now, from this tension, the rooms serve as a counterpoint, really. There's hordes and hordes of dangerous mobs below, but you come out from the hallways onto a little ledge. For both rooms, actually. You can just take your time and either pick them off from the ledges, build bridges across, or just dump lava on them, and in general, you're in a very dominant position. Even the room with the wool has this setup, making a surprisingly empowering end for a dungeon. And the purpose of the maze, I think, will be left as an exercise to the viewer. So, into the fire. Now, I tried diagramming this area like before, but it really quickly got too interwoven to describe in an easy schematic, mainly because it's very vertical and multi-layered, plus that whole minecart track interconnecting everything makes it complicated. So instead, I'll just point out a few things that I feel were done really well, and I'll keep it short because I raved about this area quite a lot, I think, in the actual Let's Play. Now, the intro portion, we've got stairs, a cliff, lava island hopping, and a tower. Now, not only does each area play significantly differently, I'm not going to bother to explain that, I think that one's fairly obvious, but each one also gives views of the next area. From the stairs, we can see down on that little lava island, and as soon as we get down to the lava islands, we see that tower off in the distance. It's a great way to really push the player forward. Now, next up, once we get in the lower levels, this stretch leading towards the wall is fantastic. Each little section here has different enemies, and more importantly, in a way, different consequences for falling. Fundamentally, fighting one melee mob and another is not that different. Fighting one ranged mob and another is not that different. But falling onto ground versus falling into a pit with blazes versus just straight up falling into lava, entirely different. Likewise, we have this stretch on the opposite side, also mixing everything up, but instead really pulls the player forward with brand new scenery. Now, again, I could probably discuss this area all day, but for the sake of editing, let's move on. Now, Portal Island. Portal Island is another fantastic level in terms of differences in scale, made all the better by its non-linearity. First, it opens with a short little linear section with very close quarter combat with wither skeletons. Now, of course, by now the wither skeletons aren't that deadly, but I think everyone who plays CTM maps played vanilla Minecraft at some point, so everyone has those little preconceived notions about wither skeletons, automatically are equal danger. It then opens up with a myriad of different sections. We can fight on the netherrack, bridge over lava, fight skeletons in blackened trees, climb towers, get surrounded by every fiery mob, explore the dark mirror of the arch. Whatever you want, pretty much. And of course, since it's very open and non-linear, you can do whatever order you like. If you get bored of clearing the mobs near the wall, you could go climb a tower and delve into the infinite, or check out the arch, or maybe just make everything safer and dump water everywhere. Fantastic area with just huge amount of differences in kind crammed into a relatively small area. Finally, the source. Now, this was probably one of my favorite areas, and I don't think I have to detail differences in kind within the very final teleportation section. That is, textbook differences in kind, pretty much. But what I think gives a really interesting contrast and case study are these two areas with the floating blocks. Now, they look almost identical. The first one of these is populated with invisible flying skeletons, which were less difficult than I expected to get a picture of, and the second with blazes and ghasts. Now, I'd actually argue that mob-wise, the first is more dangerous. Hard to see targets with knockback, whereas blazes and ghasts are pretty nerfed if you bring fire resist potions. The second feels far worse, though, and the main difference there is how you enter. In the first, our goal is to build up, meaning that if we need to make a quick getaway, we have gravity on our side. We can just jump down, since if you don't have feather falling boots by the time you're at intersection 5, something went wrong. In the second, though, we're going down. Escape is far, far harder than it would otherwise be. If we want to get out of there, we're going to have to bridge, build up, or miserably tunnel through obsidian if we really hate life. Either way, though, it's that simple change. Effectively, the only difference in the areas is, do we start at the bottom or do we start at the top? And that alone creates a massive difference in kind, with, frankly, very, very little effort. I'm assuming it was the exact same brushes for each one just to populate everything. It's a fantastic case study on how to mix up, get a strong difference in kind with very little work, which, maps are big enough as is. we don't need more work. So, there were all the areas and examples that I wanted to talk about. And you may have noticed that so far I was only really pointing out examples that existed in the map. I didn't really talk about how to make differences in kind. And that's mainly because there's, as far as I can tell, there's no guideline or formula to follow. It's really kind of more of an art. What I can say, though, is don't think from the designer's perspective, but of the players. You know, when you're building stuff, ask yourself, if I put this here, how will the player react? Or, what can I do to make this area feel scarier? Is this room different enough from the last one to keep the player interested? Now, if you constantly question and test and revise your designs, then stuff will get better and better with each iteration. That's just as true as CTM maps as it is with art or game design or really any creative endeavor. Anyway, this has been Caladoon with Let's Analyze. I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope I've given you something to think about, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.